everyone, welcome back to But Why Though, and today But Why Though is reviewing Castlevania Nocturne Season 2. As always, I'm your host Kate, and I'm here with Nisha.
Hey guys,
And yeah, Castlevania. If it's a lot.
I'm not gonna lie, I've screamed multiple times throughout watching the season, and I just love the tradition of me and you continuing to talk about Castlevania and how much we love
Yes.
this series.
Yes. To kick this off, if you're watching this and you are a Castlevania fan, ButWhyThough.net has a bunch of Castlevania pieces from essays and articles about different characters, different journeys, to our general reviews. Me and Nisha have been covering it since the original Castlevania series, and it's something we're doing with Nocturne too.
Hmm.
Happy to be here on video doing it.
Yep.
And yeah, so like let's get right into it. I'm gonna go ahead and read our description for it.
Hmm.
So everybody knows. Here's a synopsis from Netflix. Now joined by the legendary Alucard, Richter Belmont and his band of vampire hunters are in desperate race against time. Erzsebet Báthory, the vampire messiah, who already seems invincible, seeks the full power of the goddess Sekhmet, so she can plunge the worlds into endless darkness and terror. The series is it 6 episodes? Six
8.
episodes? Eight episodes. It's eight
Hmm.
episodes long. Clive Bradley wrote episodes 1, 4, 5, 7, and 8. Testament wrote episode 2. If that name sounds familiar, I believe it's because they also wrote the Annette episode last season, which is one of the
Uh,
standouts. Temi O wrote episode 3, and Zodwa Nyani wrote episode 6. So that's kind of where we are. Oh, and then of course, Sam and Adam Dietz directed it with Clive Bradley also serving as executive producer from Powerhouse Animation. I said all that because I wanted to get it out the way and say, God, y'all did a banger job again. You
they
did
don't miss.
it.
They just powerhouse. Y'all don't miss. And I cannot continue to just like not geek out about them whenever someone's like, "Oh, this animation is dope for like Blood of Zeus,
Hmm.
Castlevania Nocturne." I bragged to everybody and like it's Powerhouse Animation. Go check out their website. Make sure you go follow their website or follow all of their things because they do
Yeah.
amazing things.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those elements for me is like in the Western animation space,
Hmm.
we don't have a lot of we don't have a lot of adult animation that is being done at this caliber and taking as many risks. I mean, and I
Yeah.
really can't name another studio that is doing it like Powerhouse is doing
Mm-mm.
it, specifically from the US. So it's exciting to see, which
Yeah.
meant that my expectations coming into season 2 of Nocturne were really, really high. What about yours?
Yeah, my expectations were pretty high just given how the story was building up and like let's talk about Alucard showing up in the final hour and killing Drolta. Like that alone, I had high expectations for where the story was going to go at the end
Yeah.
of season one because I was just like, y'all just killed like the baddest witch. Like y'all just killed her off and like where is the story going to go now? But
Yes.
also Alucard is here and I'm happy. So continue, please.
Yes. No. And I will say it is not a spoiler. Oh, and I will say this. Everything up until the point we say they're spoilers, we're only going to mention stuff that is available in the trailer. And the trailer that just released today on 1/13/2025,
Mhm.
you see our girl Jolta back. So we know that's happening. If you have not watched it like we have,
Hmm.
you know that it's happening, and I think it's something to get excited for. Because
Yes.
I, much like you, was very worried as to what they were going to do because so many members of the extended cast seem to have been taken off the table.
Yeah.
Tara's transformed into a vampire. Eodard, couldn't really tell what was happening with him. And then
Yeah.
of course Drolta was a desiccated husk. So
Literally a husk, just shriveled. But no, I mean that's a really good
um
point because like I feel like them taking out so many characters, you're just like, where the heck is this going to go now? And
mhm.
clearly now we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, which I want to like really get into talking about what we liked kind of right off the bat with some of the choices. So
Hmm.
what was when we start with the season, what were some of the things that Powerhouse did that Clive Bradley and his team did that really stuck with you and stuck out as something that is like, okay, this is something only Castlevania can do.
You know, I guess like to get it out the way, like bringing Jolta back,
Yeah.
like bring bringing her back and just like in the way that they did it, phenomenal. Would not have guessed that is how they would revive her or resurrect her, whatever
Yeah.
you want to call it. But like I thought that was amazing, and it also opened up more lore and more questions for me personally when it comes to the
Yeah.
lore of Castlevania, because like we know only as much as they have told us. I'm sure people who play the video games are very familiar with that part of the lore may know more, but I thought that was
Yeah.
really well done. I think expanding on certain characters and their backgrounds and their origins and their culture, even like with Annette, like we get just as much development we got with Annette in the first season. I felt like they did a really good job of building upon that and not just pushing it to the wayside, which it wasn't that I was ever
Hmm.
worried that that would happen with Powerhouse Studios with Castlevania because they just aren't that kind of studio that do that with their characters. But
Yeah.
it's just something I think we've seen before in other series that where like you introduce this very interesting character with all these powers and you give us like a snippet or like some attention to like their origins and then that's it. But no,
Yeah.
like we got more development on top of what they gave us last time. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think like what Powerhouse does well is its characters. Like even if we like pull away from its beautiful from the beautiful animation, like I think that is a given.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody is making nobody is making characters that look this way in any from any
Mm-hmm.
country. I mean, you can clearly see the Bishonen and like 90s influences, 90s anime influences in it, but it is still very much its own thing. Outside of that though, I think like to your point about Annette's like background, I think every single character that we see in season two either puts a nice cherry on top of the story that we got
Mm-hmm.
introduced to them with in one, or
Mm-hmm.
expands on their background in a way that doesn't feel too much exposition. I can
Yes.
think of Juiced. Juice
Yeah.
specifically, we don't get a whole episode dedicated to him like we do Drolta or
Mm-hmm.
Annette, but we understand what his path was. We understand what happened. We understand how he lost his magic. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's the ability to craft characters that feels like each are cared for, right? Like even Mizrak,
Mm-hmm.
like we don't know everything about him, but we
Yeah.
learn pieces about him just as the other characters do. And I think that that is it takes a special writer and it takes a special team to be able to take a character and make them have such an impact, both in big ways, like Annette and Drolta get full episodes, and that happened last season with
Yep.
Annette. But also in the more subtle ways of understanding who they are and how they play within the world that's more largely there. I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's probably what I don't think anybody else is really doing that in the American space when it comes
I
to
would
animated series.
I would agree because I can't think of many like Western-based studios like shows produced by them that are doing that on this level, especially for adult animation. I'm sure
Yeah.
I can think of like stuff that's more geared to like young adult, why like that kind of stuff that's like maybe
Hmm.
doing that same thing, but like this is on a completely different tier.
Yeah. I think the other thing for me too, and I'm really interested to kind of hear what you think as well,
Hmm.
is I think what struck me about the first Castlevania series was how it used intimacy and sex consistently,
Yes.
and it used it as a part of the story. What I think about with that series is that that's a very visceral connection. It's a physical connection. It's a
Hmm.
connection that the series kind of deconstructs as violence and oppression and also liberation.
Hmm.
This series, I think, does something similar, but it does it with love without the physical piece.
Hmm.
And I think that that's very striking because if you distill Castlevania down to it, we are only here because Dracula loved his wife. And every choice that has been made by every character, both in the original Castlevania series and Nocturne, are about their relationships, platonic, familial, or romantic,
Hmm.
and what they do for others. And I think what you see specifically with Mizrak and Ulrox, with Annette and with Richter.
Hmm.
You and even Alucard to his Belmonts.
Yes, yes, his
They're,
Belmont
they're, they're
grandchildren or
yes,
godchildren.
godchildren. Yeah, there is like a reverence to the idea of love
Hmm.
in a way that I think is really beautiful in the midst of such a traumatic and violent show.
Yeah,
Um, and we end up seeing that too being motivations for the bads as well, because Erzsebet grieves Drolta in a way that a wife or a girlfriend would grieve.
yes.
And when Drolta comes back, she's very dedicated to Erzsebet.
Hmm.
And I'll talk a little bit about my thoughts on how it ends, but like there is like love is what is binding those two together. And I didn't
Hmm.
expect that.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think like you said it exactly right. Like Castlevania, like the animated series, does not start without Dracula falling in love with his wife and like all the events that come after that. And then it's like from there it's like Trevor and Sypha. Then you even Alucard has love throughout the
Hmm.
series and the tinted that he has love that we don't even see before. And then it's also like the familiar bonds and everything. Like it's not just one kind of love. And I think that's like the really nice thing about it.
Yeah.
Because it shows how love can be a motivator for different things. And I
Yeah.
think it's just like so interesting. So I'm like, oh my God, love isn't always just like one way. It's not ones and zeros. It's actually like more complex. And it's like just like in the real world, love is very complex.
Hmm.
On the flip side of that, I would say this season also, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I think from the piece I wrote about Isaac and his journey of agency, I think this season specifically built off of the line, like, I'm the one that holds the knife.
Hmm.
I feel like that being spoken felt like a call back to like power and agency. And I think them using
Yeah.
that imagery or rather the metaphor of the holding the knife, who's the person that holds the knife, as a way to show how people how they hold and use
Yeah.
power and agency and how it can be transferable.
Yeah, no, you're completely on the money there. And it's the idea. And I think that like Maria had like she was kind of there last season. She
Yeah.
wasn't bad. She just, was there until the end and then it was really interesting. And
Hmm.
this season, to your point about who holds the knife, it's this idea of a literal child having to grieve their mother, grieve a father they didn't even know that they really had, but has totally
Hmm.
ruined their lives. And then have to grapple with the fact that she is now holding a very powerful knife and she
Yes.
has to choose what to do with it. Like it's
Hmm.
nobody else's choice but hers. And I think and we see that with other characters too. Like it's really interesting how I think those two things intersect.
Hmm.
Because there's a part where Maria asks Alucard if Dracula was evil because
Hmm.
Alucard has killed his father obviously, and Maria is trying to figure out, oh, do I go kill dad?
Hmm.
Uh, and he says something where like, well, no, he loved my mother, and I don't, if there's anything that can keep someone from being evil, it's probably love. And it's one of those things that I think the series does really well with balancing its power and love in its relationships
Hmm.
is when that power kind of supersedes everything else in life
Yeah.
and how it drags everybody down at the
Hmm.
same time. Which I know you want to talk about Erzsebet and Jolta,
Please.
which this is where I will say spoiler territory. So if you
Hmm.
are listening to this now and you have not seen it, we're going to get into spoilers. You have been warned. Pause and come back or keep listening. It's up to you.
You've chosen your fate if you're still listening right now. So, yeah, Erzsebet and Drolta, I think, especially with like how power and agency can be transferable, specifically the power part of that. Because, up to this point, we've seen Drolta be a dedicated, loyal servant to Erzsebet.
Hmm.
What this season did was flip that entire script and the table over. And
Yeah.
we see that like it's the other way around because it's not that Drolta was the servant, it's that she was actually the mastermind. And I love the way they did it, but it's it left me with this open-ended question because not to get into major spoilers, but like there's a moment that happens where Drolta realizes this or not realizes, she states this power was always mine.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, so did you always plan to use Erzsebet? Did you always intend to use this woman to to basically do all the work? Granted, but Drolta did all the work, so that power is rightfully earned by her. But it's basically like you used her as a guinea pig so that you could get the power that you wanted through her. Easier.
Hmm.
I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah, and it's weird because like I feel like I came to the same conclusion, but like on a different path. Because for me, when Jolta kind of shows her cards,
Hmm.
it was a situation where you understand that Ersebeth loved Drolta, but she loved Drolta because Drolta worshipped her. And
Yes.
once the agency comes into Drolta, you have
Hmm.
Erzsebeth not, maybe not being all with it anymore. And on
Hmm.
the other hand, I feel like when Drolta says that, I feel like she loved Sekhmet. She
Hmm.
loved the idea of who Erzsebet could be and who Erzsebet could bring out in her. But
Yes.
when she realizes that she can carry the power, it's just like, oh yeah, no, I don't got to use you. Like
Yeah.
I can love myself now and I
Hmm.
will just be her. And I think it kind of arrives at the same thing where it's like no matter what, you realize that Erzsebet was just a vehicle for Drolta to do what she has always wanted. And that flipping of the script is insanely well done.
It's so well. I can't think of a better reveal. I'm honestly
Hmm.
just like gobsmacked. I can't think of a better way to have executed that because it's not that we ever underestimated Drolta's cunningness or
Hmm.
capabilities or her strengths. Like Drolta has always shown herself who she is, and I don't think
Yeah.
she ever hid any of her cunning at
Yeah.
all. But I feel like it's just because like how she was introduced to us, I think it was all set up to give us that misdirect that she was only meant to ever be a servant
Yes.
instead
Even
of
in the beginning of the season, all of her
yes,
backstory is her serving Sekhmet.
exactly, exactly. And it's just like until the moment where she realizes that in order to bring about the world or change that she wants, she has to take power for
Hmm.
herself. Even that scene is very moving and shows how Drolta takes her own agency into her hand and basically chooses to carve out her own fate.
Yeah.
And oh, it's so good. It's just so good.
It's really, really good. I mean, and I think too, so the other thing that I really appreciate, like, and we're talking about side characters, like quote
Yeah.
unquote side characters, and they are this robust. We
Ooh.
don't have a lot of time, but I do want to touch on Baby Boy Belmont Richter, a man who I found annoying when he first came onto the screen. I am now deeply in love with because and I wrote about this last season. I have a piece up on the site where I
Mhm.
talked about the fact that Richter's vulnerability is his strength and the fact that he has to travel through the weakness and leave with it and still carry with it or
Mhm.
carry it with him. That is key to who he is, even when he's like extremely powerful. And I think what I really liked about Nocturne season two is that Richter has to fail multiple times and he has to
Mhm.
feel that failure and live with it. And he also understands how to play his role within a larger piece. And I think that what I loved about that is there's this real struggle within him about what being a Belmont is. There's this moment where he's talking with Annette and they've lost one of their fights, and he's just like, my mom was killed. And I always told myself that because she died saving me, there was a bigger reason,
Mhm.
and I have to be someone more. And oh my God, I'm not. And I think that like that level of struggling is really it's a really interesting way to approach the Belmont lineage
Mhm.
in a very real way of somebody who has lost something or also is struggling to place themselves within their family or their larger identity. And to have your protagonist, especially your male protagonist, be this rich in emotion and
Yes.
reflection It's really beautiful. And it is really reminiscent of those early shonens and seinens that we get. Like I get real big guts vibes from Richter, to be honest.
Thank you. Thank no, thank
Right?
you.
Like the berserk is everywhere in here, and Richter is sweet baby guts, like if we're
Hmm.
honest. A
No,
lot of
yeah.
trauma, different types of trauma, but still a lot of trauma. But
Yeah.
there's a kindness to Richter's soul that I think is very different than what we've seen with the other Belmonts and
Hmm.
what we saw with Trevor and what we saw with Juiced.
Yeah.
His kindness comes from a sense of importance that he feels, but it also comes from a sense of ignorance that I think really paints him in a way that allows him to, I don't know, just like accept the world in a different
Yeah.
way. And also, like, the last episode when he holds onto Annette and he's just like, I have
Bro.
literally lost everybody. I will not lose you. And this is probably my favorite like moment of the whole show. And Alucard puts his hand on his baby boy's back and is just like, you know, she wouldn't want this. And that's all he has to say. And you see Richter having to understand that he can't just keep holding on to somebody and keeping them away from somebody because of loss in the past. And I think that it's so
It's
well done. It's
it
so well done.
that part had me in tears because I'm not again, not knowing how that was gonna go. I was just like, I swear to God, I'm not gonna be okay depending on how these next minutes go. But to your point, I think Richter being who he is, it's like almost I kept on reminding myself like he's only like maybe 17 or 19 at most.
Yeah, like this
He's
is a coming of age story. Like
it is.
Nocturne is coming of age.
It is.
This
It's
this is this is your traditional shonen protag coming of age.
and it's one of those things where like we were introduced to Trevor and Sypha and they were maybe mid 20s, I want to assume. But like
Yeah, they
they
were
were
adults.
seasoned. They were adults, they were seasoned, and they were experienced in the world. Whereas like Richter
Hmm.
has experience in the world and fighting monsters, but like he's still very much a teenager, or I
Yeah,
will at least say like a young adult. Like he's old enough to make decisions and know right from wrong. He's not like
yeah.
a 14-year-old who goes on an adventure to go kill a monster. Like, no, he knows the cost of like somebody's life and like sacrifices has to be made.
Hmm.
I think totally that part where Alucard tells him like that's not what she wanted. There's also like a similar scene where Alucard basically not humbles him in a way that makes him feel um worthless, but reminds him of like what would you actually do? Like you would be of no help in this situation to her.
Yeah,
So you have nothing, you can do nothing but sit here and wait and support her. And it's one of those things where it's like if more shonen anime characters were told that line, I feel like a lot of things could be avoided. But it's
yes.
like I think it's a message that a lot of people have to understand. Like you can't owe it. You're not always going to be the main hero in the story you think you live in.
Yeah. Well, and so I would even say that I think so. I think a lot about, I love Lord of the Rings. So I think a lot in Lord
Hmm.
of the Rings terms. I think one of the most beautiful friendships in all of literary history is Sam and Frodo. And it is very specifically because when Frodo is struggling and he cannot continue, Sam understands that there is no world in which he can pick up Frodo's burden and carry
Yeah.
that burden instead of Frodo. But he can pick up Frodo and make sure Frodo gets to where he needs to go. And I think like that mindset is something that I see very much reflected in what Richter is understanding that he has to do. And this
Hmm.
isn't to say that Richter becomes a side character. Like he is still
No.
like this is still he's still very primary here. He gets the big finish with a great Easter egg for Castlevania fans of the
Hmm.
video games. But you're right in that like he has to go through understanding his place in the world, and sometimes that place is behind somebody and not in front, and it's
Hmm.
it's 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 really powerful.
Yeah, I agree. I love that main character energy. I don't want to say it's a thing in Castlevania because honestly, they do a good job of sharing it with all these characters where like
Yeah.
they have it balanced where like they each of these characters have their moments to shine and develop
Hmm.
and like really get the story across
And none of
and
it
add
feels
something to it.
forced.
Yes,
Yeah, none of it
nothing feels
feels
forced.
forced.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And it's just like I'm so tired of forced narratives where you have to make this side character feel important to the
Yes.
overarching plot. It's none of that. There's none of
Yeah.
that, and it's beautiful.
it's like every piece of background, every piece of culture, every flashback, every single thing that is put into this story is something that pushes it further.
Yeah,
And I we try to keep these short, but I do think it's important. Like everything that happens in in Nocturne season two, I think builds the world of Castlevania in this animated form much bigger because there's still very much like a lot of elements of Rondo of Blood. There's a couple of like Symphony of the Night Easter eggs, even though it is very much not Symphony of the Night in
hmm
terms of what is happening. But this is a series that is thriving in its own lane with
hmm
characters that it has taken from being on the sidelines or a small boss or a small helper and expanding them, I think in a way that we really should want from other video game adaptations.
I agree.
And I think very deeply, like for me, like I think Olrox is probably one of like the my favorite examples of a character being adapted and taken into such a wider range because he is extremely intimidating and he shows up as the big Aztec god that he is to fight and you know that he can hold his own, but yet he still understands where his like he never loses his personality because
hmm
he's going to interact when it benefits him and it just so happens that it's when his lover is involved and he also doesn't want to bow to this white lady who has
No, like
decided to take over the world, which is
stand on
beautiful.
business, Olrock. He stands on business. He does not want to bow to her. He does not want to be branded by her. He doesn't want any of that. But he is just like,
Yes.
I'm playing the field as he needs to get what he
Mm-hmm.
wants. And I just love that about him as a character. And season three, I want more backstory on him and like
Mm-hmm.
more expansion into that whole thing. Because
Yeah.
I'm excited for what predict like what could possibly be coming for season three.
And I think to like close this out, like
Mhm.
I don't think they've been greenlit for season three yet. I want there to be a season three.
Yeah.
However, I do think that this season of a show, it does something that a lot of Netflix series can't do. It ends. Like it
hmm
puts a bow on everything in a very good and earned way and I think in a very similar way to the finale season of Castlevania season 4, which makes me a little scared that we won't get more. But it also leaves a window open for
hmm
us to get more because I would say almost every single pairing in the ensemble has a story that they can take and go out and
Yes.
follow.
I was actually
So,
gonna say that because I'm like, maybe this is the end of Nocturne, but like
yeah,
if there were like other iterations or like another title like subplot that they wanted to go somewhere with, because like I want to see it. I want to see what the things that
yeah,
were laid, like the seeds that were planted this season, which I want to talk about it, but y'all have to go watch it because it's in the final moments. I feel like it's hinting at something bigger and badder coming.
yes.
And it's like, oh, this could go so many different directions because of what's going on in the world currently.
I would just like to point out that smallish ending spoiler here,
hmm
but Annette and Trevor and Eodard and Olrax and Mizrak will all be in the new world.
Yes,
So,
yes. Her and Richter in the
or
new
at least, or
world.
at least I'm
Yes.
assuming Olrax and Mizrak went to the new world because it gets mentioned by Olrax that that's what he wants to do.
hmm
So,
I mean, there's no reason for them to
just
stay in
saying,
Paris at this point. So
no.
I feel like they got a revolution of their own they're dealing with there. Y'all can leave. Y'all can just leave,
Yeah,
go back to the new world or wherever you want to go, and let's see what happens.
yeah.
Oh, so good.
So, Nisha, what are your final thoughts?
Final thoughts are, man, thank you, Powerhouse Studios, once again for drawing handsome and beautiful anime characters the way you do, for doing such a good job with shading and coloring palms, because they're not just one color, like the back of my hands, that y'all actually know how to the color tones and skin tones and lighting, and that matters. And just also being able to just build upon the characters and like I feel like they over delivered. Like, and I mean that in the best of ways. They over delivered
Yeah.
on any of my expectations I had from last season to now.
I think for me, last season there were a couple of things here and there that kept me from giving it a perfect score.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not this season. Like this season is perfect. And I think that there
Hmm.
is something to be said. And we're seeing it a lot in the anime space right now, with studios from Japan who are doing a lot of work. And I think like right now is even traditionally really good studios are kind of floundering with the amount on their plates.
Hmm.
And you're seeing something that is like old style, no substance. You're seeing a lot of anime adaptations that are really beautiful to look at,
Yeah.
no substance underneath, or the other way around. And it is astonishing to see something with this high caliber of animation with the same amount of thoughtful choices made for the series.
Hmm.
And I think that that is a real testament to the showrunners Kevin Coldy and Clive Bradley and Sam and Adam Dietz as in directings and all the other writers that they've had come on. It, everything feels intentional, like
Hmm.
everything. And yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect.
I dare someone, I mean, I'm sure there's other studios, but I dare someone to show me a studio that's
Not
doing
in the
it.
US.
Not in the
Yeah.
US. You know what? There we
No.
go. I dare you to
Because
show me a
even
studio in the US doing it the way that Powerhouse
Yeah,
does.
because even if somebody is like, "Oh, well, Adventures of Superman," it's like, no, that is a Korean studio. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That is Mirror. That is Studio Mirror out of Korea. So not an American studio either.
Yeah, it's not. So, just go watch it. Obviously, it has our endorsement. It's worth a
Yeah,
watch. Honestly, I've watched it twice. I'm probably gonna watch it again when it comes out, just because why not?
yeah,
It's that good. It's that high of a rewatch value for me.
yeah. I'm about to rewatch it. I'm about to do a full rewatch again before it comes out, so I can write some of my stuff. But yeah, if you want to read my review and any of my writing, it's over on butwhytho.net. Nisha, what about you?
Yeah, all my writing for Castlevania Nocturne will be on butwhytho.net, and I'm sure I will talk ceaselessly about it on Twitter and Instagram as soon as that embargo is lifted.
Yes. Where can people find you, Nisha?
You guys can find me on all social media platforms at Nisha Plays. That's at NEYSHAPLAYS.
And you can find me at Uma Mithrandir on everything, though I'm mostly over on Blue Sky these days. I do got my name on everywhere else, Uma Mithrandir, and if you know how to spell it, it's right there in the little caption. But yeah, go watch Castlevania Nocturne season 2. Like, just go do it.
Matter of fact, go do a whole rewatch of the entire franchise. What else are you gonna do?
You can do it in a weekend.
Seriously, you can.